As the mountains surround Jerusalem, so the Lord surrounds his people. As the mountains surround Jerusalem, so the Lord surrounds his people. Surround us, Lord. Surround us, O Lord. We need to be in your presence. Surround us, Lord. As the mountains surround Jerusalem, so the Lord surrounds his people. As the mountains surround Jerusalem, so the Lord surrounds his people. Surround us, Lord. Surround us, O Lord. We need to be in your presence. Surround us, Lord. Surround us, Lord. Surround us, O Lord. We need to be in your presence. Surround us, Lord. Surround us, Lord. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieve. How precious did that grace appear, the hour I first believed. My chains are gone, I've been set free. My God, my Savior, has ransomed me. And like a flood, his mercy reigns, unending love, amazing grace. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. 'Tis grace hath brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. My chains are gone, I've been set free. My God, my Savior, has ransomed me. And like a flood, his mercy reigns, unending love, amazing grace. My chains are gone, I've been set free. My God, my Savior, has ransomed me. and like a flood, His mercy reigns, unending love, amazing grace.
All right, welcome back everyone as we continue our ongoing study of John's Gospel account. We had left off Sunday toward the end of chapter 15 as we've been discussing on this final night. Jesus and his apostles are minus one, are making their way to the garden. He, of course, knows full well what is coming. He's given them indication of what to expect, though, as we've said a number of times, I don't know that they fully appreciate it. And here in chapter 15, as they're making their way, he's used this metaphor of the vine and the branches. He's talked to them about the importance of keeping his commandments the same way he keeps the Father's. That is how one is his friend, as we discuss in parallel passages in 1 John. It's how we know that we know him as Christians. He's talked about the fact that though they are servants, they are more than that. They are not only servants, but also friends of his, again, if they keep his commandments. And likened that to Paul's epistles, Galatians and Romans in particular, in which Paul discusses the fact that Christians are not only servants, but also heirs, indeed joint heirs with Christ. And this past Sunday, the last couple of verses we looked at, kind of in the same context of what he's been saying, it's talking about the fact that the world hates him, the world has persecuted him, and the servant is not greater than the master, so certainly his servants are likewise going to be persecuted. And that is the thought we had left off with. So we're picking up with 15, 26, and 27, right at the end of the chapter. I've mentioned it before in classes past, but what is the functional meaning of the word but? B-U-T. I guess in a practical sense, it usually, if not always, it essentially means ignore whatever came before, right? Someone says, I love you, but, you can rest assured that whatever follows that is not going to be a particularly loving sounding comment. Disregard whatever I just said is the functional meaning of the word in a practical sense. So he's just been talking to them about the fact that they're going to be hated, they're going to be persecuted in the same way he was, right? Verse 25, they hated me without a cause. But, verse 26, when the Comforter is come, so he's kind of shifting, yes, they're going to hate you, yes, they're going to mistreat you, but despite that, there's hope for you yet. Now this Comforter, we go back to chapter 14. He spoke of this Comforter back in 14, 16, and 17, and he's going to have more to say about him. And I try to purposefully use him rather than it. I guess typically in just our normal way of speaking, when you're referring to a spirit, you would say it. That's how we tend to use the word. But I try to purposefully say him rather than it. So forgive me if I slip. Again, it's the normal usage. But back in chapter 14, he said, I will pray the Father, and he shall give you another Comforter, which is significant because another is allos. another of the same kind, not heteros, which is another of a different kind. So it's another comforter is going to be sent that is of the same kind as him, right? So Jesus is their current comforter. He's been with them. They've been following after him. He's been teaching them, but he's going to be gone, and this other comforter will be sent. So this other comforter is divine, just as he is. And in verse 17, there in chapter 14, he makes it clear what this comforter is, the Spirit of truth. And he says there, whom the world cannot receive, because it seeth him not, neither knoweth him. Turn over just a minute, because I think that particular word is one that's sometimes misconstrued. You turn over to Acts 17:27, and I use this just to kind of illustrate the point. Paul here speaking on Mars Hill says that they should seek the Lord if haply they might feel after him and find him, though he be not far from every one of us. Talks about feeling after him. A lot of people, when they read that, they use it, they have the notion of feeling in an emotional sense. Right? So if I feel after the Lord, right, that's I'm looking for the warm and fuzzy feeling in my heart. Right? So I feel after him. It's an emotional, kind of intuitive, gray nebulous sense. I'll know that I found him when I feel it in my heart. It's worth noting that there in Acts 17:27, the word feel has to do with touch. It's sometimes translated happily they might grope about after him. So it's not feeling in the sense of like a warm and fuzziness in your heart. It's feeling in the sense of touch of him. You might think of a person who's stumbling around in the darkness. Like you wake up late at night, there's no light in the room, you're trying to make your way to the bathroom, and you're feeling around, trying to make sure you don't run into the dresser or stumble into something or run into the wall. And that's exactly the picture in Acts 17:27, right? You have people who were seeking after the Lord, happily, right, by chance, they might feel after him and find him. So that's the picture there. And I mention that because back in John 14:17, the Spirit of truth whom the world cannot receive. The word is lambano, which means take by force or grab. And again, we mentioned this when we covered John 14, but it's been over a year and a half ago, and it's with the context of 16, it's worth mentioning again. This can happen to Jesus. In fact, it's about to happen to Jesus. We're going to see it unfold in chapter 18 and following. They are able to take hold of him, to grab him, to seize him, because he is in the flesh. He is he's human. He can literally be taken away from the apostles, and again, he's about to be. This comforter that he's going to send after he's gone, however, that can't happen because the comforter is spirit. So, and I think this is something that's particularly comforting to them, perhaps in retrospect, once they have a better understanding of what's about to unfold, because this comforter isn't going to be able to be taken away from them in the same way that they're about to experience in the events following later this night and the next day with Jesus himself. Back to chapter 15. But when the Comforter is come, right? And one more thing that I'll note in passing regarding Comforter. The note, or the word that's translated Comforter is Paraclete, or some form of it, because Greek words look different every time you see them, depending upon the context. But that same word in 1 John 2:1 is translated advocate. We have an advocate with Jesus Christ. In Jesus Christ. So the idea of comforter, it carries the same idea of an advocate, a paraclete, one who goes alongside you. One who is standing beside you, one who is helping you, one who is pleading your case. That's the idea. When the Comforter is come, whom I will send unto you from the Father, even the Spirit of truth which proceedeth from the Father, he shall testify of me, and ye also shall bear witness, because ye have been with me from the beginning. So the message that's given to them is not his, but the Father's. So appreciate the fact that that it originates with the Father and is then passed to the Son. Remember, how many times have we seen Jesus up to this point in John say, I'm not here to do my own will, but the Father's that sent me. Right? He's said it numerous times. So from the Father to the Son, now from the Son to the Comforter, the Holy Spirit, from the Comforter to the Apostles, and then from the Apostles to everyone who follows after them. This chain is extremely important. It's also worth noting here that he speaks of the Comforter testifying and also of the Apostles bearing witness. And this is a critically important point to underscore. They were witnesses. We are not. I can't emphasize that enough. This idea of bearing witness, of testifying. Now, suppose you could, if you're talking about in the sense of, since I heard the gospel and obeyed it, I became a Christian. My life has changed as a result of that understanding, of the realization that I'm justified before God, as I've applied Christ's teachings in my life, born the fruit of the Spirit, as Paul puts it in Galatians 5. Things are better, and perhaps there's a sense in which I can bear witness to that because it's happened to me and I've seen it. But if you're going to talk about, if you're going to quote a verse like John 15:27 and say, I'm going to bear witness just like Jesus said of the apostles, well, no, you're not. And indeed, you can't. And in fact, the latter part of the verse says why, right? Because you've been with me from the beginning. How do they bear witness? Because they were there. They saw him. They walked with him, literally. They saw the miracles happen. They saw him when he was raised from the dead. Right? Paul speaks about this in 1 Corinthians 15 when he's reminding the Corinthians that there are those who bear witness to the resurrection. Right? They saw it happen. In the same way that if you go to court to testify as a witness, you had to see it, right? You can't bear witness to something that you didn't see happen. So the apostles are witnesses, and he says, because you've been with me from the beginning. They saw him. And the Comforter can testify in the same respect. So when you hear people using that word, because it's a popular word in denominational settings, right? Witnessing, testifying, you have to have a clear understanding of what's meant by it. Personally, I'm a fan of not really using it at all because of the confusion that can ensue from it. It's kind of like when you're talking with someone and they say, I'm saved by grace, just like Paul says. Well, you have to understand what's meant by that, because oftentimes the understanding behind that is grossly different from what Paul means by it. So the apostles bear witness, the Comforter bears witness, but in the sense that they do, we most certainly do not, and indeed cannot. 16:1, these things have I spoken unto you, that ye should not be offended. It's an odd way to render it, I think. Perhaps you have a translation that puts it differently. King James says that you should not be offended. Literally, fall away or stumble. The word, and it's interesting if you look at an interlinear version to see the word that's translated offended in the King James. You might be amused by the word because I think you'll recognize an English cognate there. But again, it's literally translated fall away or stumble. So he's telling them these things for that purpose, right? And it makes sense, does it not? Because in the context, he's talking about the fact that they're going to be hated, they're going to be persecuted. In fact, he's still talking about that, as we'll see in the next couple of verses. He hasn't changed the subject. But he puts this reminder in there. The Comforter's coming. So they need not feel totally helpless, again, when he leaves them, quite literally, within the next couple of hours. Verse 2, they shall put you out of the synagogues, right? They, these same people that he'd just been talking about in the prior verses towards the end of chapter 15. They shall put you out of the synagogues. Yea, the time cometh that whosoever killeth you will think that he doeth God service. Okay, so think of the blind man, right? Going back to John chapter 9. You recall on that occasion, he was healed. He went about telling people about it, and that was really his crime in the eyes of the Jewish leaders, because he went about telling people that Jesus is the one who had been responsible for it. And if you remember, they tried everything they possibly could to silence him, because they didn't want other people following after Jesus too. But you remember what their big threat was. You recall what the ace up their sleeves was. It was putting him out of the synagogue. That was the big threat. If you don't, admit that you're lying about this, if you don't retract what you've been telling people, we're going to put you out of the synagogue. You remember his parents were cowed by this. His parents, who they tried to bring into the picture to refute him, they would have absolutely none of supporting him, because they were fearful of it. But that's the big threat. And it's still, even here, Jesus himself telling his apostles, look, they're going to put you out over this. He even goes so far as to say that whosoever killeth you will think that he doeth God service. Saul of Tarsus did this, did he not? Went about killing people, killing Christians, thinking that it was the right thing to do, because at that point in time, to his way of thinking, they were blasphemers, right? The very same way that the Pharisees thought about the blind man who had been healed, despite the evidence to the contrary that was right in their face. In fact, if you remember, that became a point of contention among some of the rulers, because some of them, they saw the difficulty there. Right? It's like, well, he was blind and now he can see. What do we do with that? And it caused some division, although not enough. But this idea of people behaving this way, and when you talk about being put out of the synagogue, I mentioned this past Sunday in the sermon. It was in a different context, but look at the culture around us today. The idea of wokeness, of cancel culture. Just yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, a prominent figure at ESPN was driven out of the public sphere, fired, thrown to made a sacrifice to the volcano gods, as it were, because in an email 10 years ago he used a politically insensitive word. So now he's finished. And it happens all the time. Read go to any news outlet on any given day, you'll find another example of it. But then you wonder, how can people possibly behave this way? How can they think that the appropriate thing to do is to ruin someone? And I do mean ruin them. If you lose your livelihood, if you're a writer and you can no longer sell books, if you've had the good fortune, you've worked hard and you have the talent to become a TV or a movie star, it's a big deal. That's a very comfortable livelihood, to put it mildly. To just rip that away from someone, to drive someone out of the public sphere, to say you're finished. You'll never have a platform again. You're not going to be allowed to say anything on Twitter. You're not going to be allowed to post any videos. If you sell books, Amazon's going to pull it off the shelves so no one can ever buy it again. It is the modern day equivalent of being put out of the synagogue. It's the idea that you are now a pariah. No respectable person is going to have anything to do with you. No one's going to listen to what you have to say. If you try to talk, they're going to drive you away. They're going to tell you to shut your mouth and forcefully, if need be, drive you out of the public square. No one will associate with you. Just you're finished. You're not a part of respectable society anymore. It was the big threat in Jesus' day. Again, the blind man, we see an example of it here in John 16:2. He's warning them about it. The very same thing still happens now. It's happening in our culture this very minute. But I come back to the question, how is it that people can think that's an acceptable thing to do? The answer is the same when you look at the case of Saul of Tarsus, right before his conversion on the road to Damascus. They think they're doing the right thing. They think it's the righteous, correct thing to do. And if you have someone with that mindset, they'll do anything. Someone who is convinced that they're right, that the other person is wrong, there's very little limitation to what they're willing to do to another person in the name of executing righteousness. And Jesus warns them about that. They're going to put you out of the synagogue. They're even going to kill you. But note the reasoning behind it. Whoever does this, who puts you out of the synagogue, who kills you, will think that he doeth God service. They think they're doing the right thing. Okay, it was a problem in the first century. It's still a problem now. So when people mistreat you because you're a Christian, maybe there just are hateful people out there in the world, and it doesn't matter. But I think a vast majority of them, especially in our culture today, they're going to do it because they think it's the right thing to do. It's a dangerous thing, but it's still very much around. Christians pay a price to follow Jesus. That's his whole point here in John 15 and in the beginning of 16. It's going to be hard. People hate him. They're going to hate those that follow him. Right? Luke 9:23, Philippians 1:29, 2 Timothy 3:12, 1 Peter 4:12-16. All of these echo the sentiment. In 2 Timothy 1:7 and 8, Paul, speaking to Timothy, regarding Christians, says, be partakers of the affliction of the gospel. Partakers of the affliction of the gospel. The trouble that is inherent in obeying it and living it. There's not a single place in the Bible where we're told that we're not going to suffer as faithful children of God. In fact, we are guaranteed quite the opposite. It's one of the things that I think should, if you have any semblance of Bible knowledge whatsoever, the televangelist spiel should immediately ring false in your ears. What do they promise? Become a Christian and life is going to be a bed of roses, right? You're going to get a promotion at your job. You're going to get a giant house. You're going to have a boat. 6 cars. If you'll just send them, $300 seed money as a sign of faith, and then you're going to have all these things. I think what you find regarding the Christian life in Scripture is the exact opposite of that. If anything, your life is going to be harder because you're a Christian. And just look at Paul as an example, right? Hopefully it isn't that hard, but you never know. Certainly the way things are trending now, it could very well be. Again, we just finished studying the book of Revelation, right? If you want an example, look at the entire book. These things will they do unto you because they have not known the Father nor me. He said the same thing. Said the same thing in chapter 15, and really that's what it comes down to, right? They don't know God. Again, they don't care. they don't care. We talked about this Sunday. You try to make a case against this type of thing from a religious standpoint, using the Bible to try to support the argument. It isn't going to get you in far because they reject it. Yet again, going back to verse 2, they're convinced that they have righteousness on their side. They think they know, but they don't know, and so they don't care, right? They have not known the Father nor me, and yet whosoever driveth you out of the synagogue, whosoever killeth you, will think that he doeth God's service. And that's what makes it such a dangerous thing. But these things have I told you, that when the time shall come, ye may remember that I told you of them. And these things I said not unto you at the beginning, because I was with you. He was with them, but he's about to leave. Again, what do they understand about this? It's hard to say, I don't know. But given their tendency toward thick-headedness at times, I doubt they fully understand. They're going to. And he's telling them things they need to hear. Why don't any of them ask, whither goest thou? Because at this point he's making it more clear to them. That goes back to chapter 14. But he's about to leave, and he's telling them things they need to know. And there's going to come a point in time, not terribly far removed from where they're at right now, that they're going to remember these things that he had told them. And it's going to be of tremendous comfort to them without a doubt. But now I go my way to him that sent me. And none of you asketh me, whither goest thou? Again, because he's already told them. Go back to chapter 14. He's going away. He's going back to the Father. And I said at the beginning of chapter 14, this goes back to chapter 14, verses 2 and 3 specifically. Right? He said he's going back to his Father. He's going to prepare a place for them. Right? So it should be clear to them at this point, he isn't going to be there anymore. I go my way to him that sent me, none of you asketh me, whither goest thou? But because I've said these things unto you, sorrow hath filled your heart. Put yourself in their shoes. How would you feel? I dare say, sorrowful, right? I mean, they've been following after him all this time. He's about to leave them. He's telling them, don't worry about it, because you're going to have another comforter. He's going to be just like me. He's going to help you in the same way that I've helped you, so you're not going to be alone. But it's going to be hard. You're going to be hated the very same way that I have been. People are going to put you out of the synagogues. They're even going to kill you. It's going to be extremely difficult. And their hearts are full of sorrow. Which is didn't he just tell them in the last chapter that he's speaking these things so that joy might remain with them? This goes back to 15:11. These things have I spoken unto you, that my joy might remain in you, that your joy might be full. I think you find here this real conflict between having joy on the one hand, but then on the other hand, the reality of trying to deal with it. Back when earlier in chapter 15, when we were talking about verse 11, we asked the question: how can he possibly be talking about joy at a time like this? He's walking to the Garden of Gethsemane, which is a veritable byword for sorrow, right? Think of all the songs that we sing, especially relating to the Lord's Supper, about the Garden of Gethsemane. It is synonymous with grief and sorrow. And yet he's talking about the fact that as he's telling them all of these things, he says, I've spoken this to you, that my joy remain in you, that your joy might be full. How can it be that he can talk of joy at a time like this? And I think it underscores what we said earlier. Sometimes it's easier said than done, right? Paul writing to the Philippians from prison talking about joy. It isn't necessarily the easiest thing to realize that. And it speaks again to the fact, as we discussed, that the kind of joy he's talking about goes much, much deeper than just a surface level contentedness, the way we tend to use the word, right? Just kind of a warm and fuzzy feeling. When he's talking about joy, it's something much, much more than that. And again, here in 16:6, he said earlier, he's telling them all these things that the joy might remain in them. But now, persecution, the Comforter's coming. I'm going away. None of you are asking, where are you going? Because I've said these things unto you, sorrow hath filled your heart. They're full of sorrow, and understandably so. I think any one of us would admit, if we were in their position, we probably would be as well. And yet, despite that, the joy can remain with them. Their joy might be full. And despite the difficulties they're going to have, there's hope, because this Comforter will be coming to help them. All right, we will continue, Lord willing.
Over all the earth you reign on high, every mountain stream, every sunset sky. But my one request, Lord, my only aim, is that you reign in me again. Lord, reign in me, reign in your power, over all my dreams. In my darkest hour you are the Lord of all I am. So won't you reign in me again? Over every thought, over every word, may my life reflect the beauty of my Lord. 'Cause you mean more to me than any earthly thing. So won't you reign in me again? Lord, reign